Colombo Chronicles Live. Colombo is on their trail. Listen up at Colombo Chronicles Live.
That's right. Listen up. You're listening to The Rose on Colombo Chronicles Live every Wednesday from noon to 1 p.m. That's on the west coast of the good old USA. Check your state and your country and check the time, bookmark, and share, and follow Colombo Chronicles every Wednesday. When we have very prominent guests from around the nation who are experts and authors. And now we are going to enter into the world of experts and authors. And today we have a really dynamic guest, and she's the author of I Am the Product of Rape, a memoir. And her name is Catherine Wyatt-Morley. And she wrote a really serious book. It's a shocking story that traces the repeated patterns of rape and incest that plagued 4 generations of her family, including her birth, and we're going to and how she achieved overcoming her issues and then helping women around the nation, maybe even around the world. So let's say hello to Catherine Wyatt-Morley and welcome her to Colombo Chronicles Live.
Hello.
Hi,
Hello.
Catherine.
How are you?
I'm fine. It's a pleasure to have you today on our show. And I know it's a really serious topic, and so a lot of people will be listening intently because we have a problem, of course, with sexual harassment, as everybody knows, and allegations of rape across the country for decades. And no one hardly talks about incest, and because for many reasons, of course. So, Catherine, I wanted to ask you to tell us, tell our audience, where you were born and about your mom and her age and who sexually abused you.
Well, I was born in Michigan. I was born in Flint, and I was born to a 12-year-old who was molested by her stepfather. So, hence, that makes me the product of incest and rape, hence the name of the book. And it was a horrific, I was adopted, and so I grew up in an adoptive home. And so it wasn't until I was well into adulthood that I met my biological mother and the family and learned the truth, because over the course of time I had, of course, sought my adoption file and went through the process of getting my adoption file open, but come to find out what was in my adoption file did not necessarily ring true after I grew up, of course, and met my biological mother, who then told me the truth, that she was 12 years old when she gave birth to me. And, of course, as a 12-year-old, she had no rights, or she didn't know actually what was even happening to her, of course, back then. And so it was a very traumatic situation for her to endure, and it was a whole thing that culminated in so many secrets and lies, which is one of the interweaving things that readers will find throughout the book. Is just secrets and lies and cover-ups of those secrets and cover-ups of those lies. But I mean, a child of 12 giving birth, you can only imagine how horrific that had to be back then.
Anytime. I mean, seriously, and especially when you're raped. And,
yes.
And an innocent little child, you're a child at 12. And you said you were born in a filthy basement to your 12-year-old mom, so apparently she didn't have anywhere to go as well.
Exactly. She had no idea of even when she went into labor, she had no idea what was even happening to her body. Kids were, girls and boys, they were so different back, all those so many years ago, and the way we think of, as open as America is today, we were not that way back then. And so she had no idea what was happening to her. And unfortunately, the incest for her began at the raw age of 7. And it culminated. Yes, it's just horrific to even give it any thought. But it culminated into my birth at age 12. So, when you think of a child at 7 whose body isn't even completely developed, and then at 12 to give birth in a filthy basement alone, not knowing what was happening to her, it was just absolutely horrific. Absolutely horrific.
And also back then, Catherine, not only did people not talk about incest or sex, basically didn't talk about sex, and then definitely didn't talk about it to little children or even teenagers. And so you were just supposed to wait till you got married, and that was it.
Exactly.
Because it was, shameful and embarrassment to the family name and blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. So did your mom have, was she living with her parents? Where was she staying?
Yes, she was living with her parents, and unfortunately, and this is another horrific twist in the book, and is that her mother knew. She was living with her mother and stepfather, and her mother knew what was happening. Eventually, she discovered what was happening to her daughter, and she turned a blind eye, allowed it to continue. And, of course, in August, she gave birth. And when she had given birth to me, her parents were in another city trying to find a place to put their pregnant 12-year-old daughter because, of course, this is a disgrace. Of course, no one is supposed to know. And as you said, shame and all of those things. So they were trying to figure out where they could put her before I was born, but they didn't know that by the time they got home that very day, she had given birth to me in the family home's basement. And when they got home, my mother, 12, and I the ambulance had already been called, and we were at the hospital. And I never laid eyes on my mother or again.
So, what about your grandparents? You never had seen them again either?
Absolutely not. It was, I was taken to the hospital, and that was it.
Wow.
None of them wanted to
and
have.
That really was. It was probably very common back then because, from what I've heard, they took the girl to the hospital, and then they took the baby away and adopted the baby out. And that was that.
And that was that. That's exactly what happened. There was no look back. There was no thought. There was no anything. It was, they took her home. That was it. That was that. And end of discussion. It was never to be talked about again. And that was it. That was just it.
So did your mom, how did your mom overcome that as she was growing up? And did she marry?
Yes, of course. She did marry. She grew up, and she married and had 2 other children after giving birth to me, and no one in the family, my half-sisters, no one in the family knew that I existed, except for my mother at 12 years old was the oldest of 10 children. And when she was pregnant with me, her mother, my grandmother, was pregnant also. So there was a lot going on. And so she grew up and married and had two children, two girls, and none of them knew anything about me until I found my biological mother. And when I found her, the first thing that she did was to tell her other children, by the way, you guys need to know that this is a part of my past that has come knocking.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
right.
that's how my two sisters found out that I even existed. But of course,
Did they
the
accept
older,
you?
yes, absolutely. I mean, immediately,
Oh.
and just wonderful young ladies, They realized that it wasn't my fault. I mean, and it wasn't their fault. It wasn't, and it wasn't even their mother's fault. There was no fault,
Right.
to be placed.
Right.
They have been extremely accepting. But my mother's older siblings at the time of my birth remembered, and they have had a difficult time dealing with the fact that I had found my biological mother.
Wow. And oh my gosh. And so, when you met your mom, she's only 12 years older than you. How did that feel?
It weird, I guess, is a great way
it
to
would
say
be
it.
like an older sister, you know.
Yeah. It really felt weird because when I met her, I was still convinced that the information from the adoption papers, though we had, spoken, many times on the phone, we eased into a relationship. We didn't just, okay, you have 2 or 3 phone conversations and every single thing. So there was still a lot within the adoption files and adoption papers and all of those things that I was still clinging to. So when we first met, it was weird, to finally lay eyes on the person that actually gave birth to me. But it was something that was important to me, and as a mother myself, I felt that it was important, as far as my lineage and my heritage, and something that I felt that my children and my grandchildren would deserve to know. So it was a very interesting first meeting.
I would think so, because people would think, oh, you're going to bond right away, but it's like a stranger, right?
It is like a stranger, and no, we did not. We did not bond right away. All relationships take time, and the reality is, of course, we've had those, initial, 3-4 conversations over time, and then you decide to meet, and so we did, and the initial hug, and all of those things, and you just kind of want to touch that person, just to make sure that person is real. So there was a lot of touching, just to kind of, like, wow, okay. So not only now am I putting a physical body to the voice that, these several conversations that we've had over the phone since we actually met, but now I'm putting a body to that, I'm putting a face to that. And one of the things that I found so strange is that, and I don't know how others who, meet their biological parents for the first time, but I was trying to find myself in her when I first met her. I was trying to find, do I look like her? What part of me is like her? What, you just kind of want to link yourself to that person. And so I found myself trying to find me in her.
And did you?
No. I did not.
Oh.
Yeah,
Oh.
no. no. which made it a little more difficult, because I really was, what about, do I have her nose? Do I have her, what? And that was difficult for me, because by then
I can understand that. Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah. By then, I had a little taste of the history about how I was created. So if I didn't look like her, then one would assume, ew, you know?
Yeah.
You got to look like somebody. Yeah.
Did your stepfather, did he, I mean, it was her stepfather. Did
right.
he pass away, or is he still
Yes.
around? Or
No, yes, he had been deceased for many years before I met her. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I had pictures. Eventually, of course, she showed me pictures, and I met his children, and it's so weird because, of course, the children that he had with my grandmother, my mother's mother, are my sisters and brothers / uncles and aunts. And I found that really to be a twisted scenario. Sisters and brothers that are actually uncles and aunts.
Yes, uncles and aunts, and one of them's only like 12 years older than you, right? Just like your mom, and because your grandmother was pregnant at the same time. That is very, very confusing to anyone, I would assume. Very odd and confusing, and, to try and comprehend all of that. So, oh my goodness. And we're talking to Catherine Wyatt-Morley, and she wrote the devastating book, I Am the Product of Rape, a Memoir. And she wrote it, Jalyon Welsh-Cole. And she's your daughter, right?
She is, yes. Jalyon is my daughter, and she wrote the epilogue.
And she also says that she was also by her eldest brother, and she wrote the epilogue, I Am the Product of Rape, a Memoir, and an essay she called Burning House. So I'm going to take a little break and grab a glass of water or juice or whatever and catch your breath. And then we'll come back and we'll talk about your daughter and her experience and her writings as well. And also about her writings and what her essay, and about her essay that's called Burning House. I like that title, and I'm intrigued by it. So let's take the break. And you're listening to Colombo Chronicles Live right here at Worldwide Online Podcast.